Good evening and welcome. It is 7 p.m. on May 25th. Our mission is to create a safe and caring climate and culture in which we prepare, engage, educate, empower, and inspire all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today and tomorrow's society. Mr. Mose, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Mose, could you do the roll call?
Bruce Henches.
Here.
Monica Seguida-Schwartz.
Here.
Bruce Mose here. Al Dahlgren.
Here.
Jerry Van Korf.
Here.
Jeff Pull Rice.
Here.
And Shannon Hawes.
Here.
Let the record show the Superintendent Willie Jett is at our meeting, as is Assistant Superintendent Marcia Beisch, and our directors Olson, Potter, Gunji, DeLand, Bowe, and Scalarud. Thank you.
Thank you. First is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board routinely adopts without debate. Any single member of the board may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. The full text of items can be found at the end of the agenda. Tonight, before we move it forward, we will be removing item E, the acceptance of the monthly financial report. The month has not been closed out yet, so Amy will be bringing that forward at the next meeting. On tonight's consent agenda is A, approval of tonight's agenda, B, the approval of the minutes, meetings April 27th and May 10th, the monthly treasurer's report for April 2017, approval of the payment and bills and other financial transactions in the grand total amount of $4,128,471.34, approval of personnel and staff changes, acceptance of grant awards and donations, H is safe routes to school grant resolution, I, approval of the list of graduations for Apollo and Tech High Schools 2017, J, Quarry View Education Center change orders totaling plus $17,297. K, bid award South Junior High secure entry. L, bid award Quarry View Education Center irrigation. And M, bid award Quarry View Education Center HVAC controls. I am looking for a motion to move forward on the consent agenda minus letter E.
So move.
Monica?
Al, I'd like to actually remove a couple more things when I get time.
Can we get a second
Yep.
first?
Second.
Second? Okay. Now, you would like to remove items?
It's item new hire, Bonnie Fitzharris, both of those, and the South Addition, item K.
Okay, I didn't catch the first two. Which?
It's under new hires, Bonnie Fitzharris, Nurse, District Administration Office, and it's on there twice.
So it'd be under the approval of personnel and staff changes?
Yeah.
So we need to remove that and just,
So it will be just new hires? Should we just remove new hires?
Rehire.
I believe we would remove entire item F, approval of personnel and staff changes, and then we can come back and discuss those. So the consent agenda then would be moved forward minus letters E, F, and K.
So I amend the motion?
Is there any discussion?
I can
If-
have a friendly amendment of my motion.
No, I think we had a motion and a second. We're just going to make that amendment on the two. Mr. Mose, did you call roll?
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Point of order.
Jerry Van Korf.
Oh, Monica.
So what are we voting on in the motion that I apply or with the amendment? Or
Removing
amended with removing that?
We're voting on the consent agenda, removing items E, which we're not going to vote on tonight, item F for discussion, and item K for discussion.
Okay.
So the rest of the consent agenda.
Thank you.
So, okay.
Shannon Hawes,
Yes.
Jerry Von Korf,
Yes.
Jeff Pulrice,
Yes.
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Bruce Henches,
Yes.
Monica Segura Schwartz,
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes.
Okay, then we will bring item F forward. So I'm looking for a motion on item F, which is the personnel and staff changes.
What page? I'm lost.
I have my own sheet.
Mr. Chair, I will move approval of item F.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Monica, then discussion. Jeff?
Just want a clarification on Ms. Fitzharris. It says it's effective for the 2016-17 school year. Shouldn't this have been on an agenda consent about 8 months ago? And then the other one is effective August 29th of 2016. Is this just a clerical that it never showed up before now? There's only 9 days left in school.
Yes, that's correct. Some of our return to work agreements got delayed in terms of coming to the board's attention, and this one in particular because the amount of time that special ed needed Bonnie to work was still in flux during the school year.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, Mr. Moses, would you call roll?
Bruce Henches,
Yes.
Jerry Von Korf,
Yes.
Shannon Hawes,
Yes.
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Jeff Pulrice,
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes.
Next would be item K, the South Junior High secure entry. I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion, Jeff?
Just need a little clarification. I know we talked about this before. Will this cause other projects to be talked about in the future? Is this going to affect the parking lot and then the tennis courts? Is this just step one of 2 or 3? And whoever wants to answer that can.
This is just the piece of, or a bid to do the secure entry. So very similar to what we've done at North Junior High. Any future parking lot projects or tennis court projects or anything like that would be outside of the scope of this project, and those would be future decisions that would come forward to the board for approval.
So this addition could be done without affecting those.
Correct. The addition itself is a very small amount of square footage just to kind of square off the corner of the building. It's not a substantial building addition. Really, the majority of the work that's being done is all interior remodel work.
Towards the tennis courts? Is that what's squared off or the other end?
No, right on the corner of the building. And I don't have the figure with me, but it's less than 500 square feet that's being added. It's very minor.
We're talking about the front entrance, so at the front where the administrative offices are.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Moses, would you call roll?
Jerry Von Korf,
Yes.
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Shannon Hawes,
Yes.
Jeff Pulrice,
Yes.
Monica Segura Schwartz,
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Thank you. Next, we move into information items. Item A, 2017 District 742 Climate Survey Results. Dr. Sylvia Huff. Welcome, Sylvia.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, and members of the board. Tonight, I will be presenting the 2017 Climate Survey results. And as always, we start with our mission. And one way that we strive to achieve our mission and also measure our progress or how well we're accomplishing our mission is through our annual climate survey. And so this year, the 2017 School Climate Survey once again targeted all stakeholder groups. So this includes both licensed and non-licensed staff, students in grades 3 through 12, as well as our parents. In particular this year, we made a significant effort to increase response rates. Last year's response rates were decent, but we wanted to increase the number compared to the 2016 climate surveys. And so we worked to accomplish this by using two different methods. For staff members, we had designated or dedicated time for them to complete surveys. In particular, from the 2016 survey data, we had a lower response rate from our non-licensed staff members. And so for this particular school year, we worked with the principals so that there was designated time in the day for our non-licensed staff members to be able to complete their surveys. Similarly, for our licensed staff members, we launched the survey on the Choices Day, so on one of their professional development days, and there was a specific time during that day where all licensed staff members received the link to the survey and were able to spend time reflecting on the questions and completing the survey. For our parents, we worked to increase the response rate by sending out paper mailings, basically, to all families in the district. Last school year, the survey was only available electronically for parents, and we had a lower response rate. And we know that not all of our families have access to technology, so this year we also sent out the paper copies of the survey by mail in pre-addressed, pre-stamped envelopes, so that way once the parents received them, they had the choice of either accessing the link, because the link was provided on the paper copies, or completing the survey on the paper form and then mailing it back to the district office. And once we go through the data, you'll see that these approaches were effective in increasing our response rates for those groups. Another point to mention is that the 2017 school climate survey contained many of the same items as the 2016 survey. We wanted there to be consistency so that we would be able to make comparisons between last year and this school year. However, the surveys themselves are not identical. The 2017 survey is shorter and includes a new category. We decided to shorten the survey because some of last year's surveys, depending on the stakeholder group, so in particular licensed and non-licensed surveys, had upwards of 75 items for the staff members to complete. And we know from survey development that the more items that are on a survey, the more likely people are to become disengaged and start to just click check neutral or not really pay attention to the items or be as reflective. And also, the more likely they are to not finish the survey. And so then we wouldn't have valid responses towards the end. So we made a decision to shorten the survey. So every survey had no more than 50 items, and really only the staff surveys were the ones that reached that cap of 50 items. We also included a new category on the parent surveys and the licensed and non-licensed staff survey. And this was a very quick category that focused on communication. Normally, a separate survey goes out to these groups about communication in terms of how they prefer to be reached out to, the methods that they use when they're seeking information from the district. And given that we don't want anyone to have survey overload or survey fatigue, we decided to include this particular component in the annual survey so that way, since we're reaching out to them in this one particular instance, we could get all of the data at one time. And finally, the same scale was used in both 2016 and 2017. We used a traditional Likert scale, so ratings from 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree, for all of the items. Again, the categories that were used this year were very similar to the ones last year, with the exception of the addition of the communication item or category. And so the engagement questions consisted of items that focused on cultural and linguistic competence, relationships, and participation. The environment category focused on physical environment, instructional environment, and discipline. The safety category was about emotional safety, physical safety, bullying, and emergency readiness. We had a 1-question category on the mission statement. And then for our parents and staff members, we had a survey category on communication, so finding out about their preferences, the timeliness of information, and the ease of use of our websites. From our results, we observed that all areas did show an increase in percentage of positive endorsements, which we are very excited and proud of. We also noticed that environment and engagement were the highest scoring areas of the big three. So out of environment, engagement, and safety, once again, environment and engagement had the most positive responses. Responses around bullying continue to be an area of exploration. And from our communications component, we found that staff and parents tend to prefer email as their main source of communication from the district. Okay, so now we will get into the survey data itself. I will break it down based on stakeholder surveys or stakeholder groups. So we will be starting off with the licensed staff surveys. So the first thing to note here is that in 2016, we had 451 valid staff, licensed staff surveys, and this school year, we increased that number to 823. So again, the designated time was effective in increasing response rates. Just some demographics. For the most part, the majority of the respondents were female, and the majority of the respondents were white. In terms of the professional experience of our licensed staff, 22% have 24 years or more in terms of experience, and 19% have 0 to 3 years of professional experience. And building-specific experience, so working in the building that they currently serve, 51% of the individuals who completed the licensed staff survey have worked in their building between 0 to 3 years. The majority of the respondents were teachers, as we would expect for the licensed staff survey, and we also had responses from other licensed professionals and administrators. So presented on the screen are the items that were included in this year's engagement section of the licensed staff survey. And the agree column encompasses responses of 4 or 5, so basically agree or strongly agree. The disagree column encompasses scores of 1 or 2, strongly disagree and disagree, and the neutral or unsure column encompasses any score of 3. We collapsed it just to be able to summarize it more briefly for this presentation. And as you can see at the top, when we average across items, the percentage for agreement with this particular category is 75.6%, and that is compared to only 55.8% last year. And those percentages are for all items that were included on the surveys, but as I noted, not all the 2017 and 2016 surveys weren't completely identical. And so the chart that is currently on the screen is a side-by-side comparison of the items that were included on 2016 survey and the ones in 2017. And as you can see, between 2016 and 2017, we did see some substantial gains for many of the items. And the very last row highlights the true comparison when you average across items. So we actually increased from 59.2 to 75.6% in terms of agreement with the items that were included in both 2016 and 2017. These items that are presented on the screen now were from the environment category that were included on the licensed staff survey. And again, presented at the top, you can see that when averaging across items in 2016, overall agreement with the environment category for licensed staff members was at 47.9%, and this year across items in the category, it has increased to 70%. And when we do a side-by-side comparison of the items that were included, there's more. Environment was a slightly longer section, so this is a continuation of some of the other environment items. And when we do a side-by-side comparison of the items that were included in both 2016 and 2017, once again, you can see that we made some substantial gains. Just looking at the second item, morale is high on the part of teachers. In 2016, only 23.1% of teachers positively endorsed that, and in 2017, we're up to 61%. And so you can quickly glance down the columns to get a sense of the improvements and perception of how we're doing in environment. And when you average across items in 2016, overall agreement with this category was at 53.6%, and this school year it's up to 70.6%. So again, we're seeing very large gains in how our licensed staff are feeling about the environment of our district. The next category was safety. And in responding to safety, you can see that overall, the level of agreement is the most consistent between the 2 years as compared to the other categories. So in 2016, it was right at 69%, and again at this year, it's about 69%. But when we do a side-by-side comparison of the items that were included in both, we can actually then begin to see where the gains lie. So it's actually more positive than last year. We see an increase from 68.1 to 77%. I know there's a lot of information on the screen, so I'm just giving you a chance to read some of the items. Okay. And as I mentioned, the core values category only contained one item, and it assessed individuals' understanding of the mission and core values. So whether or not an individual says that they understand our district's mission. And in 2017, 89.8% of our licensed staff agree that they understand, and this compares to 80.5% last year. And so that's showing the same thing. The final category for our licensed staff was the new communications component. And the charts here are indicating preferred modes of communication. So the one on the left indicates how our licensed staff prefers to receive communications from the district. And they were allowed to select all that apply. And based on that, 39% of staff say that they prefer email. And similarly, when our licensed staff are seeking out information from their schools or from their district, they also tend to prefer email. So for this particular item, they were only allowed to select one choice, and 34% indicated that they prefer email, 27% prefer to use StaffNet online, and then 21% just goes directly to their administrator or to other staff members to get their questions answered. And as you can see here, regarding information that comes directly from the district, our licensed staff feels that the information is timely, sufficient, and easy to understand. And the majority also feel that they can easily find information when they're visiting their school or district's websites. Okay, so the next stakeholder group are, yes.
Before you go on, I don't know if we should stop between each one and ask questions. I think it's going to be an awful lot if we go to the very end and then have 5 different categories or 4 different categories. Or if you'd prefer, we can.
We can go in between
I think,
categories.
I
that's
think
fine.
there were a few questions. So, Monica, did you want to start?
Yeah, I'm making a list, so give me a second. So I want to give kudos to Willie in the answers and the vision for the schools being shared, and it's clear. I like the numbers there, that the 72%. That I see in there, so kudos to you for that one. I had a question about, so in the slide where we're talking about students, I am satisfied with the student behavior in my school. Okay, hold on. I feel that the staff in this building treats boys and girls equally, then the whole, is the licensed environment, that one. So there are a lot of equalities there. So I wonder if you have different ways in asking those same questions, and if people clearly can define what equal means to them, and if we have, and kind of a segue with that question is, do we have advice from sociologists, or I don't know if that is part of your experience, or anybody in the cabinet that does the surveys, to see how surveys are better, how questions in surveys are better better formulated to get the answers that we're looking for?
So for that particular item, we don't have like a parallel one to make sure that the responses are consistent. And one of the reasons is because we did have to eliminate items to make the survey shorter. But when we were constructing the survey, both this year and last year, we did use the research that you're supposed to incorporate when developing survey. And I do have a background in survey design as well, but you're right, that is a potential limitation because there is only one question that really gets at that particular construct for this one.
Okay, and then going into the part of license communication, the one with the pie, I had a question for Willie, I guess. So what does this tell you about when you see this pie that has 16%, 10%, 8%, and different ways of communication in the first one? How do you prefer to receive district communication? What does this tell you? What do you use when you see this?
What it tells me, what it tells me is we've been trying to reach staff in multiple ways. And we've had staff that years ago said that we did not communicate enough and that it was not clear. So as you see here, we've tackled that, and it's Tammy DeLand's communication department who has been spearheading this in terms of making sure, in the same manner that we have all the different social media ways of getting to folks, in this, I almost said, new day and age, what this tells me is that people have options to receive information. What it tells me is that we still have work to do in terms of trying to figure out the exact way that staff likes to receive information, but I think that we're getting better at it. And so if I'm walking in buildings and I'm asking, is information being delivered to you? Is it the way that you want to receive it? I'm getting positive feedback from that, and this is just some information for us to be able to go ahead and make some more decisions. Bruce?
Bruce?
A question I would have, you pointed out that the environment area is an area where there are some lower scores that we would certainly like to improve. And when I look at that area here for the licensed staff, the three lowest scoring areas are bullying of students is not a problem at the school. Twice. Well, my guess is any kind of bullying, I guess what I'm going to suggest is we look at how we ask that question. And perhaps the question should be more along the lines, bullying at this school is handled appropriately by the administration. Because certainly I think every school in the country has bullying issues, and especially with the internet and electronic bullying now, that it's very common. So I wouldn't have expected certainly that our staff would have said, no, there's no bullying, problem at our school. And then the other one down there a little farther, also dealing with bullying, says our school has specific times and places set aside. Do we expect that our schools will have specific times and places where students can talk about bullying? Or is the real question, again, our school has ways for students to report bullying, effective ways of reporting bullying? I mean, I'm just saying the way the question's asked might be one of the reasons why.
We're saying and endorse the way that it is.
Right.
And that is a very good point. I think that the first item you highlighted in terms of just whether or not bullying takes place at the school is still one that we would want to include in order to get a sense of its occurrence or prevalence and see if there are changes over the course of the years, because I think that's still valid information. But I agree that then a necessary follow-up question would be to see how it's being handled and if there are trends in positive endorsements in terms of, yes, we handle it immediately and effectively.
Sure. Dr. Beisch?
In response to, do we have, times, and I need to take my glasses down, but, we do. I would say that during every, elementary takes time, during social emotional learning time to address bullying. We have very specific lessons around that, how to report it, how to respond, who to talk to. At our secondary levels, that kind of information is shared during advisory time. So we do take time to actually, teach students what to look for and what to do and how to respond, and how to report it and who they can go to.
Shannon?
First, a comment that the number of surveys you got back this year, the excellent job addressing that issue. Can you tell me how many surveys were sent out when you had 823 returned? How many?
So with the teacher survey or licensed staff surveys, we didn't actually send any out. We sent out the link to all licensed staff at the exact same time. And so we have, roughly 900, is that right? Licensed staff members. And so out of the 900, 823 completed the entire survey.
Third return rate.
Thanks.
Jeff?
Yeah, I just had 3 questions. Do you mind flipping back to that pie chart about communication? This question is probably for Willie or somebody, but if administration would do the same pie chart, what would the one on the left look like? Are we delivering it in the same way they're expecting it, or is that still a work in progress?
What method?
If this pie chart was filled out by admin, what would it look like? How do you prefer to give district communications, or how are you giving district communications? Are we utilizing everything that they're expecting to receive from? You know what I mean?
So if I understand the question correctly, you're asking from a district leadership point of view, what do they believe that in terms of?
Yeah, what would
if
your
you-
pie chart look like?
Okay. And so I think that's something that our district leadership team has conversation about. I believe if you're in our principal meetings, there's always a constant conversation in terms of how principals want to receive information. And so we've tried to make sure that we give our administration information in a succinct way. And we try to do it via email. We try to do it via phone calls. So when you're asking, what do I think the chart would look like? I think it would be similar.
Okay.
Because our district administration is a microcosm of the district. I do believe that our principals, our district leadership team, the way that we are sending out information, the way that we are communicating, I think we've improved. I think, like I said earlier, we can always get better, but I think it would be similar.
Okay. Second question is for Dr. Huff. On your original, where you sent out all the surveys, I want to commend you. You got a great increase in response. I noticed on that slide it was 0% for paraprofessionals. Were they sent a survey?
So paraprofessionals were sent a survey, and the reason that it even shows 0%, like even on the graph that's shown here, is that it's less than 1%. So the response, I felt that it was still important to show it, and the graph is rounding up. So like on the graph that's shown on the right on the screen right now, those 1% are more like 0.8 or 0.9, and the zeros are like 0.4 or 0.3. So yes, they're represented. It's just that they were a very small subset of the individuals who responded.
Within that subset, how many paraprofessionals were sent the survey?
For the licensed staff survey, the licensed paras, how many licensed paras do we have in the district?
My guess is that they're on there at all because perhaps an errant survey went to a paraprofessional. They wouldn't be getting the licensed staff survey. They'd be getting the non-licensed staff survey.
Perfect, okay. And then final question, what would your guess be on what caused the high increase in teacher morale? Is there anything we did differently or better, or what's your guess? Because that's a great increase.
I would say that it was our intentional efforts beginning last winter, spring, when we conducted climate meetings at all of our sites to get a sense of what staff concerns were about. And then based on that, we made a number of changes in our building. We had some increases in special education staffing. We developed focus rooms at all of our sites and so on. So those are just some of the things, but we put some very intentional steps into place as a result of the feedback that we got.
Awesome, thank you, great work.
And
That's it, Al.
if I can add on to that, Marcia, I think that last time it was somewhat before negotiations, and this one was after negotiations, and we actually changed their contracts to have that hour built in on Wednesdays, wasn't it, where they had staff development, and
Yes.
prior to that, they had been staying after school and
Well, and
after
I
hours to complete that, so it was more done on the
Yes.
clock and less done off the clock, so I think that would have quite a bit. Tracy?
I would just add to that the data time is the Wednesdays, but one of the things that has really improved our teacher morale, and I think it's really something that other districts, as I talk with my colleagues in the school MASPA's association, they're all looking to solve this problem about teachers feeling overwhelmed with just the demands, the increasing demands of students, but then just the management demands of the job. And so I think the work that we did with the teacher protected time on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, where we have taken all school meetings off the table, and so those are really teachers' time to be able to feel prepared for class. The feedback that we're getting from the SCEA is that has made an enormous difference in teachers feeling more able to meet the demands of the job and less stressed by that meeting schedule that had been there kind of all over the place before. So.
Jerry?
Thank you for this. Does the administration get a breakout of these responses by school?
Yes.
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 So, because some of them would seem to reflect things that principals maybe need to do, so you're on that. Then the second thing is, in the environment and safety area, there are a cluster of 40s and 50s that all seem to be connected in many ways. And I'm not really interested in laying that question on the table this evening, but it would seem that at some point it would be neat for the administration to come back, maybe at a workshop, and assess, and maybe you think the 40s and 50s are okay, I'm assuming that you don't, that they're the areas where there's work to be done, to have a dialogue about that. I mean, we can't possibly have a dialogue about everything that's in here. And related to that, there were some things that were done to raise what we're calling morale here that involved leadership and collaboration. And then there were some things that involved money. That I don't mean pay, I mean getting some support. And I think if we want to keep these where the good ones where they are, and raise the ones that we ought to be when we're doing our budget, making sure that we're not removing the supports that have made the improvements. And you're nodding yes, and so that would be my comment. Let's at some point talk about if there is a connection between the 40s and 50s, what you all are doing about that, and I'd be thrilled with that.
And I think if you look at the screen that Dr. Huff has up there now, one of the things, if you look at last year, the same thing that you're talking about in terms of trying to improve, so the 40s and 50s, this screen that you're seeing here, you can see the upward tick, but there's definite things that we need to continue to do.
Kind of in the same slide that Jerry was talking about, what concerns me there is actually the neutral numbers. So you have, and it concerns anything over the 18 or 20%, there are several numbers. So I wonder if you, how does the district address that? And in other cases, if it's further segregated data to understand that the people that are answered that have no clue about these things or that don't feel either way are people that don't have to
For
be
the
in
neutral
relationship with them?
responses.
Or, yeah, that are not,
When we
well,
were,
some of them are. Okay, let's have an example. So bullying issues are handled consistently at my school. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I don't know what kind of staff, but maybe some sort of staff don't know that because that's not part of their job. That wouldn't concern me as much. I wonder if you segregated that data to understand which staff responded that. However, when you look at our school has clear policies for dealing with bullying between students. I see a 20% there of people that are very neutral about it. For me, it's clueless. So I'm concerned about that.
right, And I think your suggestion of disaggregating it further is a good one, and that's a conversation that we've had about this, in particular when we go to the non-licensed staff survey information, because they had some similar questions. And non-licensed staff not only includes non-licensed staff who are in the classroom, but also grounds workers, custodians, and so there are some items where they probably don't know, and so they are trending towards neutral, but we'd want to parse that apart further. For the licensed staff, we could break it out and see if there are particular buildings, and definitely to see if there are differences there, and then start planning for the work that would be needed to increase those scores and lower the amount of neutrals.
One thing you can always do is go with the six dot scale too, so they have to lean to the right or the left.
That's true, or a 4, and just get rid of the 3 altogether, yeah.
So, okay, are there any other questions on the staff, the licensed staff portion? If not, Dr. Off, go ahead.
All right, let's skip forward. Okay, so for our non-licensed staff surveys, in 2016, we had 81 respondents, and this year we increased that number to 231. Similar to our licensed staff, the majority of our respondents were white females. In terms of the professional experience of the individuals who participated, 47% have 0 to 3 years of professional experience, and about 52% have about 0 to 3 years in their specific building site. The non-licensed staff surveys were completed by individuals who were both in the classroom as well as outside of the classroom, in offices, and then also in other areas in the building, so health offices, custodians, grounds workers, etc. The first category on their survey was also engagement, and the items are presented on the screen, the ones that were in the full list of items that were included in the 2017 survey. Averaging across the items in this particular category, we had a 64.6% rate for agree, and that is compared to 50.4% for last year. And again, not all of the items were the same, so when we compare apples to apples, you can see that we were able to increase the overall category response rate from 53.5 to 64.6%. The next category was environment, and this category was the longest one included on the survey, similar to the licensed staff survey. In 2016, when averaging across items, 46.3% was the average for agreement, and in 2017, we increased that to 65.6% for all items that were included in this category. And so again, these items are continued on the next slide. Here. And when we compare the items that were identical between 2016 and 2017, it gives us a better sense of how we are doing. And so this is a subset, and the rest of them are on the next slide. So I'll give you a second to look at these before I go to the next slide. And as you can see, when averaging across all items that were included in both 2016 and 2017, we increased from 49.5% to 65.6%. So the next category was safety. And for these particular items, the response rates, once again, in terms of positive endorsements, were the closest across years, but we have seen some increases, and I will show you the exact comparison here. And so as you can see, we have increased from 55.4 to 62%. The core values and mission section, once again, was just one item. And in 2017, 83.5% of our non-licensed staff indicated that they agree with the statement that they understand the district's mission and core values. And this is up from 67.5% last year. And the final section for our non-licensed staff was communication. And very similar to our licensed staff, our non-licensed staff members are indicating that they tend to prefer email when they receive district communications, and that they also prefer email as well as StaffNet, and seeking out help from admin or other staff members when they are trying to get information themselves. And these percentages are also very close to the percentages that we saw for the licensed staff members in terms of agreeing that information is timely, sufficient, and easy to understand, and that the school and district websites have ease of use. Okay, so questions about the non-licensed staff?
Jeff?
I just want to echo what I think Board Member Von Korf was alluding to with the bullying. It looks like we made great strides, but there are 3 or 4 categories that actually went down. So I know we're doing a good job, but I think it would behoove us to maybe have a work session on that and just keep working on that.
I agree, and actually, well, as you know, the percentages from last year were also in the 30s and 40s, and so following that, we did host a number of focus groups with staff and parents to kind of delve into this topic further, to just get their feedback about what they feel is happening in the schools, what is not happening, how effective the response is when bullying is occurring. And so we have taken that information, we've shared it with principals, but based on these responses, you're right, we need to continue that conversation. That's our plan, to continue to dig into that deeper.
No other questions? You can move on.
Okay. Oops. Here we go. So for our elementary students, the survey was only administered to students in grades 3 through 5, and they took the survey during class time or during the school day. Parents received a consent form prior to the surveys taking place, and so they were allowed to opt their students out if they did not want their students to participate. So based on that, we had 1,524 students in elementary who participated in this year's climate survey. Roughly half were male, half were female, and the racial makeup represents our district pretty well. The schools that participated are presented on the screen, as well as the percentages that they make up of total respondents. Okay, so for the elementary student engagement category, the items are very highly endorsed. As you can see, the students tend to positively endorse the items. And compared to 2016 and 2017, when averaging across all items, our agreement is 76.8%. And when we compare like items between 2016 and 2017, you can see that we increased from 72.8 to 76.4%. The second category on the elementary student survey was environment. And again, we saw an increase from 79.6 to 89.3%. And just glimpsing or taking a glimpse at the items presented on the screen, once again, you can see that our elementary students are tending to agree with most statements, overwhelmingly so. And the comparison between 2016 and 2017 is relatively close. We're at 89% this year, and that's up from 85% last year. For safety, which we know is the category that we are constantly improving upon, we are seeing some good gains here as well. And so when averaging across all items that were included on the 2016 survey, the agree was at 62.9%, and this year it's at 69.9%. And when comparing between 2016 and 2017, you can see that there is an even greater increase from 59.4 to 66.4%. One thing that I will point out too is that this year's survey for the elementary students, the wording of a couple of the bullying items we think is a little too complex. And when developing these, we were trying to keep the items consistent between elementary and secondary as much as possible. And then when I went to review it again, I was thinking, how did this get past me? And so definitely going forward, we will be going back to the items like the ones presented on the screen. People at my school are not picked on or teased, and students do not spread rumors or lies, because those are far easier and for elementary students to understand. But of course, since this isn't an assessment, teachers were allowed to help explain the items to their students so that they knew exactly what they were responding to. The core values and mission statement was only one item as before, and as you can see, 74.6% of the students who took part in this survey agree that they understand the district's mission, and this is up from 71.9% last year. And that is all for elementary.
Questions? Bruce, did you have a question? No. No? Okay. Monica?
I see a very low response rate in elementary school, and I get a feeling that that has also to do with parents giving permission. Are other ways that we are getting information from this population about environment?
From the elementary students? So we have conducted a number of focus groups with the elementary students and secondary students as well. They weren't necessarily specifically part of our climate survey approach, but from some of the other plans, so like the Achievement and Integration Plan, as a component of that, we went to a number of elementary schools and asked them questions that were very similar and aligned to the items that are presented in the climate survey, just to get an idea or a sense of their perception of their experience in the district, in the classroom, their likes, their dislikes, and what's happening. So reaching out to them and having those face-to-face conversations we found is actually very effective and very informative with that age group.
So a follow-up of that, you said that there are other focus groups and other ways to get information. Is that information not included here, right?
It's not represented in these surveys, no.
Okay, can move on.
Secondary students. So students in grades 6 through 12 also took part in the climate survey. And this is the only stakeholder group where we saw a decline in the number of valid surveys. So last year, 3,094 students responded, and this year, 3,002. So not too much of a dip, but we are seeing a dip, so we have to make sure that we close that gap next year. And once again, similar to our elementary students, the gender and racial makeup of the respondents is what we would expect from our district. The schools that participated in the secondary survey are presented on the screen, as well as the percentage of respondents that they comprise. And the first category, once again, was engagement. And so you can see that the secondary students had a few more questions than the elementary students for this category. And when averaging across items relative to 2016, this year 60.9% was the average for agree. Last year it was 57.2%. And when we compare this year to last year, you can get a better sense of how students responded on the individual items. And this carries over to the next slide. And so when we're making a direct comparison between 2016 and 2017, we are seeing a slight increase in the engagement ratings of our secondary students. It was 58.1% in 2016, and this year we observed 60.9%. Environment was the second category, and this particular category had a number of positive responses and increases. And as you can see, compared to 2016, we have increased from 56.1% to 71.3% for the average for Agree. And when comparing the identical items between 2016 to 2017, the increase is from 68.7% to 72.4%. The next category was safety, and these percentages are slightly lower, as we have already discussed, but we are seeing increases from 2016 to 2017. When we average across items, all items that were included in 2016, the rate was 46.2% for Agree, and this year it's 50%. And when we compare the identical items, you can see that we have increased, although we are aware that there's still work that needs to be done. And so we've increased from 42% to 47%. For the core values and mission category, this year 63.1% of our secondary students agreed with the statement that they understand the district's mission and core values, and this is up about 3% since last year. And that concludes the secondary students survey data.
Questions? Shannon?
Can you flip back to the engagement cross-comparison?
Sure.
Where was the one where, maybe it wasn't engagement?
Environment.
There was a decrease in the belonging or feeling part of the school. It was towards the beginning, sorry.
Here you are. Yep. The second one, I feel like I'm part of my school.
Yeah. Do you have any insight in that drop?
In the drop of students endorsing that they are not feeling like they are part of their school.
And so for, I'm looking at Dr. Huff, look over at the executive directors like, okay, help me there. And so my executive directors are sitting there looking at each other. Is there any insight to that? No, that's when we do the focus groups at the schools, when we're having our principals and our our leadership teams in the buildings. This is an area that we're concentrating on and to try to understand what this truly means and why. So do we have the answer to that yet? No, we do not.
Is there, between junior high and high school, do you know the difference there? Is there, or was it just across the board that there was a general drop?
So I'm still breaking out all of the individual schools' data, and I would be able to give you a much more accurate answer once it's all been analyzed. But if it is consistent with last year's data, then it'll be pretty consistent for middle and high school, just kind of across the board in terms of their responses.
At the last meeting here, we had a presentation from ALC, I believe. and the principal gave an eloquent speech or presentation on the importance of the students feeling that teachers really care about them. And I was kind of inspired to mention an example of a student that I worked who had a similar experience in a school, and it really made a difference. And I don't know, this test isn't normed across the country,
Right.
and so one doesn't know whether this is where high school kids are across the country. But it does feel like my teachers understand when students have personal problems, and adults in my school care about me ought to have. Now, we're dealing with perception, because there's a lot of these teachers, having been a teacher where you genuinely care about the 150 kids that you see all day in high school, and so it may not be a reflection that they don't care, but there,
Right, and that's just,
one wonders what we need to do, because if kids feel that their teachers don't understand their personal problems, and if they're concerned about whether the adults in the school care about them, that's a huge deal. And I don't know how, with teenagers, how high you can get that number. So you know.
As a secondary person, okay, who's worked in junior highs and high schools, I'm not going to say that this is what you see across the country. When I'm sitting here looking at this, I look up and I see 2 secondary teachers in the audience. And what I can tell you, if I were to speak to their students and talk about these things, I have no doubt what their students will say about those 2 that are up there. We have outstanding teachers who do care about their students. You can walk into these 2 teachers' classrooms, and I've been fortunate to actually see their students and see them in action. I don't think there's a student in their class. So I would flip this if I were to talk about these 2 teachers. It is interesting because I have 2 secondary students in my house, okay? And I don't even know where to go with that, but I could see them filling out a survey in this manner. And then all of a sudden, if I were to actually place their teachers in front of them and say, does this teacher actually care about you? The answer you're going to get without the teacher sitting there, if they're speaking to dad, is going to be wholeheartedly, yes, this teacher cares about me, expresses it. They might be dealing, I'm not going to pick on my 2 kids, they might be dealing with other things in life that at times come out in these surveys. But in terms of, if you watch, so my examples will be, if you go to conferences and you watch the interaction with the family, a student, and the teacher, there's an indicator, but it's not here in the survey. If you go to ball games, orchestra concerts, music, things of that nature, and you look to see who's in the audience, it's them. I don't know why they're here at the school board meeting, but because they need to be getting rest. But if you look at, and if you speak to students and say, do your teachers, licensed and non-licensed staff in our district, do they care? It's unequivocally yes. I look at this survey and I know I have a couple teenagers going through things, and I can see them answering it in this manner.
Thank you for that. That's helpful.
So kind of a follow-up with that question. So part of why I was looking before at the questions, and it seems like in order to reduce the number of questions that we don't have ways of verification, and that might not be completely good. In questions like, I feel part of my school, asking just that, and especially to teenagers, might not be the best way to approach that. They should be there should be 3 or 4 questions in the same topic to really address those kind of things about belonging, about fairness. So if, like the questions that I was referring before, do you treat men and men equally? If you ask me that question, I'll tell you I don't want to be treated equally. I wanted to be treated as a woman. So what are we looking for? Are we looking for fairness? Is that, so those kind of things is what I was meaning about that. I also have a comment that I was going to get for later, but I'll do it now, and it's about the survey is an incomplete measurement. The focus groups will give us a lot more information, so I would have liked to have seen all together, to have kind of an analysis of the information that we're getting instead of the results of a survey. The results of the survey are useful, but it's still incomplete. They come out of context. And the focus groups provide context that we need. Along with that, I'm not sure how, I don't know, I guess there's a question here. Are you recording anecdotal, thank you, anecdotal data that will give us qualitative information about what we're seeing here? I believe that having qualitative information is really, really important, and it helps us to develop patterns, but we have to record it, and it's tempting, and it's a lot of work there, but I hope that that's a yes.
Yes, it is a yes. And again, most of our anecdotal data comes from the focus groups. And as Mr. Van Clorff pointed out, we actually conducted one of the focus groups at McKinley, and the sense of belonging there is extremely high. All of the students who were participating in the focus group, and we made an effort to make sure that we had students from across the board. So in every academic category, students of all races, all backgrounds, students whom the majority of them didn't even interact that much because they were from such different groups. And every student went around and said that one of their favorite things about McKinley was the fact that they feel like their teachers actually know who they are, know about their life, can come up to them and hold conversations that show that they actually listen and know what's going on with them, and that they feel like they can come to them. So we do have that kind of information from the individual schools. It's just not represented here from the survey data. It's just the quantitative data.
Get my microphone on. Thank you very much. Perhaps you alluded to this question earlier, and I didn't hear the answer, and maybe I'm just asking the question here for the first time. If I'm a student or if I'm a parent in our school district and I'm taking this survey, am I taking it in the language that I most completely understand? Am I reading it only in English? Or am I reading it in languages that I can understand the nuances of the questions? In other words, are these being translated,
Yep.
interpreted, or translated intentionally, purposely, in order to make our responses valid in that manner?
So for the licensed and non-licensed staff surveys, they were only provided in English. The parent surveys were translated into both Somali and Spanish, and based on the family's home language that we have in the database, that was how we determined the appropriate one to send in. We also spoke with secretaries and principals at the schools, so if, for instance, we had that we should be sending a Somali survey home to the family, but actually the family is more comfortable with English, then we would follow up by sending an English survey home. So the due diligence was done, especially for the parent survey, because again, we were trying to ramp up the response rates of our parents. For the secondary and elementary surveys, the surveys were presented in English, but we encouraged and in fact in the instructions told the teachers and media specialists to have the BSSs there and other translators to help the students as necessary and as needed, and if there are students that they knew were going to need it translated, to have it so that they could have that one-on-one so that the person could sit beside them and translate while they were completing the survey. So it was provided in English, but we instructed to have those supports available, and they were allowed to have someone read it to them and help them respond.
Thank you.
Bruce?
I would just share kind of a thought or an observation that I have in looking at this student engagement section for secondary students. Obviously, it's a little disappointing, the percentage of students who report that students of different cultures get along well with each other in my school. However, if you go down the survey a little bit farther, 76% of the students say that they are okay with students from other cultures acting differently than them, and just about 3/4, 73%, say they have friends from other cultures, which I think is a really very positive response from students, indicating that they are learning to interact with and develop friendships with kids from different backgrounds than theirs, and I think that's really positive.
And to piggyback on that, Bruce, if I'm on that exact same slide, when you talk about advantages and rationale and reasoning for District 742
Yes.
to make your District 742 proud, a couple sentences above that, it says, I talk to people from other cultures. And so this is, in our schools, it's real world. Okay, what are we teaching our young people? We're teaching our young people that the world can and is different when you step out of your house at times. So we're teaching them how to be successful in their futures. And if you look at our mission, it says in today's and tomorrow's society. So I think that's a great observation by you.
I agree. Yeah, thank you.
Bruce?
I'm just making this as a reflection, doesn't require any answer at all. Perhaps somebody would want to tell me that this is not appropriate. I don't know. I monitor myself pretty well. So when I see these very positive things in regards to secondary students, I'm just following up with Bruce and Willie, acceptance and friendships and comfortability and things of that, I have to remind myself that that happens because of the people that are teaching them, or administrating them, or counseling them, or coaching them. Students become who we invest our energies in and our thoughts about. And so I'm pleased whenever something pops out at me here that is gratifying. I almost immediately have to give credit to the adults that they're interacting with. And so then that for me becomes very important as I'm thinking about all of our staffing and all of the people that we're putting in front of kids at every single. Now, I'm not talking directly to you, Dr. Huff, because this is appropriate for the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and everybody else. But I can't sit here and not think that the great credit for this that's going on is because of the people they're interacting with in the classroom, in the hallways, in the offices, on the playing fields, in the bus chutes, every place. That's just a Bruce Mose reflection, and that's all I want to say. Thank you for tolerating me on that, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. Jerry?
I just want to say that again, this is not a normed test, so we really don't know where they are in the range, but we do know that we had a principal at the last meeting who came and said, it's really important to me and my staff that we surround kids. And I think there's something about high school that wants that wants the leadership, because there's so many demands on high school teachers. They're a little bit like college teachers. They've got lots of preparations. They have way more students than an elementary teacher, and so it's easy to get into a rhythm where it's almost very difficult. And I think the only way that you can make a huge improvement is to have the leadership in the building talking. I don't mean punishing people when they're not helpful to their students, but I mean creating a sense that this is really, really important to us, as we heard this last time.
Thank you. Any other comments, or do we move on? Let's move on.
So the last stakeholder group are our parents. And in 2016, we received 757 completed surveys. And this school year, we increased that number to 917. As I mentioned earlier, we sent out mailings to all families, but they had the option of completing it online if they so chose. And only about 100 parents took advantage of the online option. The vast majority of them chose to fill it out on paper and then just mail it back to us. So we had a number of paper mailings, but we did succeed in increasing our number of respondents. In terms of the demographics for our parents, the majority of those who participated were female, and the majority identified as being mothers of students in the district. The racial breakdown of the parent respondents is shown on the left, and based on one of our parent focus groups, actually, we got feedback from a couple of different parents who asked that this year we include an item that identified ethnicity of child, because they felt that by indicating their ethnicity, it didn't necessarily mean, or we shouldn't assume that that's the ethnicity of their child. So the graph on the right is presenting the ethnicity of children, and you can see that for the most part, the two graphs are pretty comparable. But for ethnicity of children, we are seeing that parents are indicating 9% at least that their child is of 2 or more races, and that's compared to the ethnicity of parents where only 1% are identifying 2 or more races. The first category for our parents was the engagement category, and when we averaged across items for 2017, the agree category came out to 69.4%, and this is an increase from last year, which was 58.8%. When we compare the items that were identical between 2016 and 2017, which were pretty much all of the items, you can see that the increase was from 58.5 to 69.4%. The second category was environment, and just like with the other surveys, this category tended to have the majority of the items. And when we averaged across for 2017, the response rate for agree was 64.2% across all items, and this was compared to the 2016 survey that had an average of 51%. Not all of the items were the same between 2016 and 2017 for this category, so when comparing across, you can see here that we did see gains in almost every category. And this continues on to the second slide, or next slide. And overall, our increase was from 52.4 to 64.2%. Safety was the third category, and quite a few of these items were consistent between the two surveys. We did have some additional ones that were included as a follow-up from the focus groups that we conducted, and so the items presented here are not completely consistent with all the ones that were included in 2016. And I think that the work that we have done with holding the focus groups and engaging parents, especially around this category of safety, is showing improvement, because as you can see, we're up about 6 percentage points from last year in terms of their satisfaction with this category. And when we compare between 2016 and 2017, again, it's around 6% of a 6 percentage point increase. The single item core values and mission category was next, and in 2017, 67% of parents who took part in this survey agreed that they understood the mission and core values of our district, And this is an increase because last year, only 59.2% of parents agreed with this statement. And the final category for parents was communication. The items were very similar to the ones that were included on the licensed and non-licensed staff survey. And so in terms of their preference for receiving district communication, you can see that parents tend to prefer text messages, phone calls, and emails. And when they are seeking out information themselves, the majority of them prefer to access the website. The vast majority of the parents who participated feel that the information coming from the district is timely, sufficient, and easy to understand, and that when visiting the school or district website, they can easily find the information that they need. And this is good to hear because apparently 62.7% of our parents visit the district website weekly. And so that is everything for the parent surveys.
Jeff.
I just got one question. Can you go back to the slide that talks about parents needing more help with math and reading?
Yes. And so the low percentages here could be taken one of two ways. I think it's another question that we would want to get more information on because we could see it as a positive that they feel like they're adequately supported. But in the sense that since there was an increase between 2016 and 2017, there might be something going on where they think that they need more support. And so I think we need to follow up further with the parents for those particular items.
Please educate me a little bit. I'm new at this, but Board Member Mose and myself were blessed with being at the Parents in Action,
Okay.
presentation. And like I said, I'm new at it, but everybody there was like, my God, this is a great program. It really helped me learn how my kids learn. Is that something that is at every school? Or is that, at that one, it was just Madison and Westwood?
It rotates.
It rotates? Okay, because that seemed like a really good vehicle to get parents' participation, so, okay.
To piggyback or to, Jeff, to talk about when you said math and reading. So as a parent that, when I look at this survey, there are moments in time, I used to consider myself like kind of on top of it and thinking I knew what, I could do math but there's things that my children bring home that I need to go to a class so that I understand what they're doing. And I think that's kind of reflective in this survey or in some of the answers. And so as a parent, when I go to conferences, I'm asking teachers, where do I go to try to support my child and what they are learning? Because of course my child says, but that's the old way of doing it, Dad. That's not the way my teacher wants me to do it. And so when it says I would like more support in math, I could raise my hand and I understand that one. I would like more support in reading. I just think that's one of the things that we learned as parents. We learned one type of way of doing things. And our students nowadays, or our young people nowadays, teachers are teaching them different. There's different methods to learn some things. And so I think that that's parents saying, please help me. Show me where I can go to get support. Show me how to be able to support my child.
Do we as teachers, or they as teachers, have an answer to that question then?
Oh, they do.
They're,
Oh,
okay,
yep,
good.
they
So
do.
there is sites out there?
Yep,
and-
their sites, there's, do I understand it? Okay, when the teacher shows it to me, not necessarily all the time. But yes, they provide that information to be able to help us to be able to assist our students.
Jerry.
I was just going to say that we've had surveys for a number of years, and actually, I would like more support in math to help my child's learning at home has been higher than this, but it's routinely pretty high, even on free-form requests. And I don't know, that may be one explanation. It may just be that math is hard.
Any questions on there? No? Bruce?
So let me just take another whack at this. I want to reflect on this matter here, and that is, I'm very comforted. The educator in me is very, very comforted by this data and these responses and these testaments. This pleases me, as it should, I think, all educators, all of us here. I'm just going to put myself in the education field now. Just permit me, please, to join you. But this is good. I would be pleased knowing that there's improvement to be made. But I'm not an educator anymore. Now I'm a public official, and they put a sign in front of me so everybody knows who's making this remark. And that person is Bruce Mose. And as a representative of a community, and living in a community as a public official, I wish, I dream that this kind of validation of how we feel about ourselves and how we feel in the community of schools and that, I wish that were more widespread across our community. And I live in the community, and I represent the community, and I have a voice to say this. And I don't intend to make anybody squirm or look away from me. But I would very much wish that if this survey was given to my church, I said that it would come back with this kind of result. Or if this survey was given to the people I encounter in my gas stations, or people I encounter in the parking lots at the grocery stores or the restaurants, or in my neighborhood, which is very close to someone else's neighborhood, that we would get these kinds of affirmations that we are doing quite well, in fact, with each other and all of our students and our parents and our teachers and everybody that's involved in this education dynamic. I just wish that somehow there would be some way that this would filter out and make differences in other people's lives. Just can't contain that feeling, because it's the truth. And there's a little bit of risk in me saying that. But when you get old, you don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. So I appreciate this. This picks me up. Thank you very much. This makes me believe, as I always have believed, that we are moving in the right direction. And I'm appreciative of that as a public official. And then I am appreciative of this very much as a former educator. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the parent section? Okay, so would there be anyone that would want to make any comments or questions on the entire, now you pull it all together and you're not looking at individual sections, but you're looking at the entire climate survey in general. And I'll open it up for comments on that. Monica.
So I just wanted to reiterate to the administration what I said to you earlier, Dr. Huff, that I think that this is good information. I agree with everybody else that think that we're moving in a good way. I think it's incomplete information. So I really like to see in the future a more complete analysis of the environment that includes the survey and focus areas and focus groups and all the information that principals gather. I struggle to figure out with the information that we got here today how it's being used. So I understand the information that you're giving us and say some movement, but I continue to ask again, how is it being used? When principals or who reads this information, what do they do? Are they developing interventions based on that? And that's the information that I'm actually more concerned about getting here than the per se, the answers of the survey themselves.
Like the next steps and the what now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Jerry? Oh,
Do you want me to speak a little bit to that? As the individual site data is analyzed, it will go to principals, and I know that they will be sharing that information first with their leadership teams, and they'll have a discussion about what they see and how they'll respond, and some of the interventions or strategies or different changes that they'll make. They'll begin to have that discussion based on what they see. And as well as district administration, we also look at this information and determine what changes we might make.
Jerry?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think we're all thrilled that we've made improvement. Then there are people in here who have raised concerns about things, and I think it's really important. We're a continuous progress organization, and what are we doing to respond to the people who did the survey that says to them they've been heard? If you're in the positive, if you're in the 60-70%, then hearing from us that we're really pleased, that's reinforcing. But if you filled out this survey hoping that something would happen, then that's not as reinforcing. So are we doing something with these folks to write back to them and say, this is what we heard and this is what we're doing, or is that too big a task?
So we have not done that, and we wouldn't necessarily be able to target people specifically because the surveys are anonymous. But I think that having like a general letter, like another mass mailing that just goes out to parents that kind of summarizes what we found from the data and our next steps or the action plan, how we intend to use it, is something that would be very beneficial.
As principals, when Monica was talking about it's incomplete, one of the things as administrators, as a district administration, all of this information, so this is just one snapshot, okay, and then you have the focus groups, and then you have parent-teacher conferences, and then you have PTA, and then you have all these different ways that you're gathering information and sharing information. So, Jerry, when you're talking about how to let people know, this is one of the things that our administrators now share with all those different groups, whether it's the parent groups, the PTA, and the focus groups, and they're sharing that, and they're talking about just what you just mentioned. Okay, yes, it's positive, but at the same token, here are some things that you as parents, you as students, have concerns about. And then now these are things that we've done to address it. What are the things that you think, in collaboration with us, what other things you think we could do to improve that? And so hopefully, year after year, like you said, we're always on continuous improvement. Hopefully we always see an upward trend in this.
Bruce Henches.
Well, I think Willie kind of said it, and I was just going to say that I think we discussed earlier some of the interventions that the administration did this year based on last year's survey results that may have been the cause for the improvements that we saw in the survey this year. So clearly, I would say for new board members, those kinds of interventions and ideas are constantly being brought to the board, and improvements are made. That, you know, a survey like this is helpful because you can see improvements that you're making or areas of concern, but we'll never get to 100%, unfortunately, and so we'll never be totally satisfied with where we are. And I think always have to reflect on what can we do differently to continue to improve. And the survey helps lead us to areas that need our improvement right now. And so things like the resolution rooms, or I forget what we call them, that focus rooms at the schools and things that were a clear need last year got addressed. And so I mean, I also am very pleased with the results that this shows and the trend that it shows, but there's clearly areas we need to continue to work on as a school district.
And just so you know, as it's things that principals and administrators, it's constant conversation. But last year at this time, we came to the board and said, okay, these are things that we're thinking about implementing, but we would need your support in doing that. So I think something that's not being said, not to pat yourselves on the back, but you can, there are things that teachers and parents, when you're seeing this positive trend, it's because you actually allowed us to be able to implement things. And so, you know, in a few weeks, in a month or two, we'll be coming to you again with some other requests, and maybe I'll keep this survey and bring that up when you have questions about that. Thank you.
Jeff?
I just want to personally thank you for all the hard work that you've done for this survey, to make the survey more refined, to make it a tool for positive change. I mean, I've done surveys before. That is a lot of work. It's obvious you're doing a great job. I just want to thank you for that.
Appreciate that.
Any others? If not, I will.
I just wanted to say one last thing.
Okay.
Okay. Because Dr. Huff is been on her feet for, I'm not going to count how long that is in terms of presenting this. And so I just want to say thank you for being able to present this information in a manner that we all understand, that in a manner that our staff can use it, apply it, and try to make if you look at our mission statement, a warm, welcoming environment that's inclusive for all. I think this is the way that we've been looking at data over the last year. It's a testament to you. So thank you.
So as I looked at it and looked at it overall, there was improvement in everything. And thank you for sending out the side-by-side comparisons. I don't know if it was just if that went to everybody or if it was just Bruce and I that got that, but to be able to look at the 2016 versus the 2015-16 versus the 16-17 side by side, and see that there was improvement across the board. I mean, so across the board improvement that it made me a little bit skeptical about the questions were asked, or how they were asked, or how they were interpreted or scored. And kind of how could our climate be that much better this year than last year, or than the year before, or the year prior? But I started looking at things, and I think there are a few things. And I mean, I'll give a little high five to Willie here for listening to the last climate survey. And I don't think it's all about the stuff that was on the survey either, but it's targeting specific things on the survey and addressing those. But overall, just the general climate in the district. If you go back to the last one, there were some things that had happened fairly recently when that survey, the earlier survey, not this one, but the earlier survey had been out. And one of them was that a walkout at Tech High School by students, and there was a lot of feelings about that district-wide, with students, with parents, with staff, with everybody. And I will commend Willie for putting together Willie and his entire staff for putting together an action plan to address those concerns, which has been very effective in doing that. Is it perfect? No. Is there a long ways to go? Probably yes. But it did address it, and it did change the climate in the schools and how kids interact with one another. And so that's one thing. Another thing that had just happened, we had our early childhood center burned down, and there was confusion, and nobody knew where they were going to be teaching the next year, or where they were going to be sending their kids in that age group. We had a levy that failed for a new high school, and the community had come out and said, no, we're not going to build a new high school. We don't support that. We didn't have a teacher's contract in place, and there were a number of things that needed to be addressed in the contract. So there were a lot of situations going on in the district during that last survey that were negative and would lead to negative answers on a climate survey. Then you fast forward to this one, and we have a new contract in which, again, because of the last survey and a lot of the things that were said, there were a lot of changes that were addressed in that new contract, and we talked about some of them earlier, giving the teachers more prep time, 4 days a week where they have time to themselves to get their work done, and 1 day that's designated for meetings when they stay an extra hour longer. That has been received very positively. The contract in general, I think, has been received very positively by the teachers. We have a new early childhood center being built, so now the turmoil around the fire has settled down, and they're settled for right now, and they have hope because we're building a new building for them, and they can look forward to moving into there. We passed a levy, and we have a new high school being built, so that we have the entire tech side of the district is extremely excited about the opportunities that are going to be afforded for them there. We have a much more proactive on-site school climate initiative going on within the district, getting students to interact with each other. We built and put in place a new level 4 school where we took kids that were causing problems in classrooms, and we can now put them over in this school and away from the disruptions that were being caused in the schools, and we've taken some of the pressure off of a lot of the teachers by doing so. And we addressed and added a bunch of special education staff, which again took a lot of the behavioral issues and calmed the waters. We added support. So there was a whole lot of things that were addressed via past climate surveys that would contribute to an overall climate improvement. And so I kudos to Willie and his staff for recognizing those and putting in place a plan that gets us to where we are today. And with that, if there are no more comments or questions, thank you, Dr. Huff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a summary of the April work session and preview of a summary of the May work session and a preview of the June work session. Dr. Marcia Beisch.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, and members of the board. We had an update of the progress on the new Tech High School. David Leopold, architect with IIW, along with John Pfluger, architect with the Cunningham Group, provided that update. David Leopold presented information on the permitting process. Meetings are held with the city every month as part of that ongoing process to coordinate work that is being done. John Pfluger provided information on the design and programming that has been flowing as part of that process. There were 3 days of meetings with staff from both Tech and Apollo that were held in April and May to review the design development of the various departments and programs of the new high school. Over 60 staff members were included in those meetings, and I was a part of those, and I would agree that they were very successful. The other item on the agenda that evening was Section 900 board policies. Gary Ganji, Executive Director of Technology and District Support Services, along with Tammy Deland, Director of Community Engagement and Communications, presented and reviewed board policy updates for Section 900 School District Community Relations, and that was a first reading. Also, Carol Potter presented and reviewed a proposed new board policy 417, chemical use and abuse, and proposed updated board policy 503, student attendance, for a first reading. That was the agenda for the work session. The June work session, we again will have an update on the new Tech High School. We'll also get we'll get a look at the 2017-18 budget, and we'll also look at proposed revised board policies, including another first reading of the revised 506 student discipline policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we move into action items. Item A, roofing projects, Clearview, Talahi, and Apollo, change orders totaling minus $251,280. Amy Scalarud.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, members of the board. I bring forward to you tonight a request for approval of change orders for the roofing projects at Clearview and Talahi as a result of changing the type of the roofing system that was planned to be installed from a 3-ply cap sheet system with modified asphalt to a 5-ply system with type 3 asphalt. I want to provide a little bit further explanation as to the reason for these change orders. Clearly, we don't typically see large deduct change orders, so I want to provide you with some backstory as to how we got here. In regards to these roofing projects, the board had requested that the district work with an independent roofing consultant to put together bid specifications for roofing systems that would provide the district with a quality roofing system, but would not be proprietary in nature. Roof Spec, which is a roofing consulting firm, was hired to do this. As the bid specifications were being developed, Roof Spec was asked by district staff to make revisions that resulted in one of the systems that was being bid being proprietary in nature without board member knowledge. Ultimately, the bid specifications contain bids for 4 roofing options, 2 of which were options for a 5-ply system, 1 with type 3 asphalt and 1 with modified asphalt, and there were 2 options for a 3-ply cap sheet system, again, 1 with modified asphalt, 1 with type 3 asphalt. The specifications that were proprietary in nature relate to the 2 options for the 3-ply cap sheet system. After the bids were opened, Roof Spec compiled a bid tabulation and sent this recommendation to district staff with what they would recommend is brought forward to the board for approval. Their recommendation was to proceed with the 5-ply system with type 3 asphalt, which was the lowest cost option of the 4 options that were bid. The recommendation that was brought forward to the board for approval, however, was to award the bid for the 3-ply cap sheet system with the modified asphalt, which was contrary to the recommendation of the independent consultant. So the change orders that are being presented tonight make the change to go back to the 5-ply system with the type 3 asphalt, which was the recommendation of Roof Spec in their opinion. And so those change orders, as stated previously, result in a cost savings for the district of $251,280 between the 2 projects.
Jeff.
Going forward, are steps, checks, balances in place now to maybe not allow this to happen so easily again?
Absolutely. We're continuing to work on revising those procedures, and we will also be having an independent firm come in and do an analysis and an audit of some of our processes and procedures in this area as well.
Jerry.
Just to clarify, you said staff made these changes, and I take it that sounds like all the staff, but in fact, it was a person on the staff who had no authority to make these changes. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And then Roof Spec executed those instructions, notwithstanding the clear instructions from the board and the superintendent that we were going to have a straightforward bidding system.
Correct.
And I agree that we are making the changes that we need to make, but I don't think we yet have it in writing, in policy, the things that we need to make sure to prevent this from happening again. I want to say that the issue of our use of Garland products has been raised for several years. I supported the prior CFO of the district's recommendation that we use that system. I felt that Garland deserved a fair hearing and was all in on supporting that recommendation until when the Finance Committee gave Garland an opportunity to explain what they were doing. It was clear that what they were doing was not consistent with what we thought they were doing. There's no indication that I know of, no direct indication that the vendor here that you've made the agreement with was implicated in that. But based on the series of events from our experience with the old method of bidding and now this one, I, for one, will, and I'm going to support this. This is something that's been recommended by you and by the district's attorney, but the next roofing that comes around, until this issue of what Garland did here and what they're going to do, I will not support Garland as a vendor for District 742 bidding. My string's run out on this. I may be the only board member who feels that way, but I just will not. We need to figure out what happened here and not have something like this happen again.
And just to clarify, the change that we've made in the system does remove the Garland product. So there is with the revision to the 5-ply system is a non-Garland affiliated product.
Yep.
And I wouldn't anticipate there being any future bids for roofing until we get to that point in the new high school, and then we will certainly have that discussion.
That was my intent, and again, that's where I am. I think you've done an excellent job in making, arriving at a fair result that protects the district and the taxpayers, and so I think it's fabulous, the handling, how this has been handled, but we shouldn't have been here. That's not on your watch, but we shouldn't have been here.
And Jerry, you know that there would be at least 2 of us on the board who would support not using Garland products going forward until we can fully understand and get clarification from them about what has taken place and guarantees that it would not take place going forward. Amy, with this, so this is a little bit of an unusual way to do. Normally we would do a competitive bid. We'd open the bids and we'd award it to the lowest bidder. That's not what we're doing here, as I understand it. What we're doing here, we did award this at a past meeting to McDowell based on the low bid on the altered specification. And now we're asking for McDowell we basically renegotiated with McDowell to walk this back to the original specification that was recommended by Roof Spec. Is that correct?
In the instance of these 2 projects for Tulagi and Clearview, we're asking them to perform the project based on the base bid. So
for their base bid, the base bid that was submitted.
Yes, it was their
Okay.
base bid. So that was included on the tabulation at the time that
Okay.
it was open. So those amounts were set and were known, and so that's what the change is for.
And we've checked with the state to make sure that they're on board with this as being a legitimate way to do this.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Our attorney has had conversations also with the Office of the State Auditor's Office in terms of process and moving forward, and this is the recommendation that has come forward from him.
Okay. Are there any other questions on these 2 roofing projects? So on these 2 roofing projects, I guess I would be looking for a motion and a second for the roofing projects Clearwater. Oh, and I have one more question before we do that. Apollo is listed on here, and you haven't said anything about Apollo. Can you explain that?
Yes, the reason that Apollo is listed is because that is how it was listed when it initially went to the board for approval. All three bids were bid at the same time, were opened at the same time, awarded at the same time. So just following with policy and procedure, we always make sure that it's listed on the agenda anytime there's a change order in the exact manner that it was at the time it was originally awarded. The reason that we're not seeing any sort of change for Apollo is that the majority of the Apollo work that's being done is in relation to the HVAC project, and so it's removing units, putting in units within existing roofing, which is the Garland system. So for warranty purposes, there really wasn't an option to go back to the table and renegotiate that one. It would have voided the warranty for a number of portions of the building.
So what we are really doing is we're changing Clearview and Talahi, but there is no changes to the Apollo. It's just listed on here.
Correct.
So I'm looking for a motion and a second then for roofing projects, Clearview, Talahi, and Apollo, change orders totaling minus $251,280.
Al, I'll make that motion.
Okay, second? Jerry? Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Jerry Van Corf.
Yes?
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Jeff Pull-Rice.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Monica Sirgoda Schwartz.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next, we have the Quarry View Education Center change order, roofing change order total minus $151,869.97.
So the change order for Quarry View Education Center is similar to what we just discussed with the Clearview and the Talahi projects. It's a little bit different, however, in the fact that there weren't 4 options that were bid for that project. There were not alternates to break out the 4 different systems. Again, the recommendation that went to the board for approval based on what was bid was for a 3-ply cap sheet system with modified asphalt, so the same system that we had on the other buildings. So because we didn't have initial bids for what the 5-ply system with type 3 asphalt would have been, our recommendation in consultation with the district's attorney was to work with the awarded installer to determine what a reduction amount would be to make that switch as we were doing with the other projects. That amount is the amount that you see in front of you, the $151,869.97. We then sent this information to RoofSpec to review it, and they determined that the negotiated price falls within an acceptable range when compared to the deduct and the deduct amounts for the other 2 projects. And so that is what we've brought forward to you tonight.
And okay, so then again, for clarity on this project, the specifications had been changed without the knowledge of the school board without the knowledge of the school board, and the specifications that were brought forward were different than what the school board had understood we were using from RoofSpec. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the award, when we looked at this before, because this came to us for an award, but we did vote on it, correct? Yes?
Correct. It came forward with the full bid package for Quarry View.
And so now we're walking back and we're going back to the recommended product from our consulting company, RoofSpec.
Yes.
And that's the roof that we're installing, and that is saving us nothing, it's saving the taxpayers, $151,869 on this one project. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this one? I need a motion and I need a second.
So moved.
Mr. Mose?
I'll second.
Mr. Henches? Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Monica Sirgoda Schwartz.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Jerry Van Corf.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Jeff Pull-Rice.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes.
Thank you. Next is item C, Board Policies Review, Section 900. It's our second reading. Tammy DeLand and Gary Ganji are presenting this.
Good evening. Good evening. This is the second reading of the 900 policies, which focus on community education and communications. After the first reading, there were some questions and a bit of discussion with 902, so we want to focus on that this evening to show you some work that was done by administration, and then it was brought back and vetted through board development earlier this week. If you can scroll down before. There were a few questions about what used to be administrative procedures, and as we've gone through these updates, administrative procedures have gone to other places as guidelines and been removed from actual board policy. There was some discussion last week as far as the wording within 4B because it did refer to an addendum. These plans and procedures are currently on the community education website, so the change that you see this evening reflects that. It directs the reader to that community ed website. And then when we went to board development, we talked about the role of the Community Ed Advisory Committee, and that when changes are made in these plans and procedures, it goes to the Community Ed Advisory Committee for review, and so that was added here. We do have those plans and guidelines that I'll get to in a minute, or plans and procedures, I'm sorry. In C, again, it was just a reference back to the written plans and procedures. And then there was a question about the use of school equipment, that wasn't included. Upon review, that is in the written plans and procedures, so that paragraph actually becomes redundant in there. And I'm just seeing right now with the removal of that, what is up there with Roman numeral 6 would then become 5. We'll make that correction before the third reading.
Gary, if you can scroll back to more towards the top, up there, yeah. In letter B, I know we had discussed this before, but in the MSBA policy, it says upon approval by the school board.
Yes.
And in this, it says will be reviewed annually by the Community Education Advisory Committee. Is there an approval by the school board? Do we need to approve that, or is that something that
Typically
can just
we
be changed?
Yeah, typically we bring fees back, and I know we had a conversation this morning. Do we call that out in there? And that's the pleasure of the board. We could put that in just to identify that after that review by the Community Ed Advisory Committee, that would come back to the board.
My gut feeling is that we should, if there's fee changes, if the Community Education Advisory Committee, they're an advisory committee, they're not a policy committee.
Yes.
So I kind of feel like if they make recommended changes to the fee structures,
Right.
that it really should come to the board for approval before it would move forward. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. Feel free to speak up and.
And that would be our practice, and I agree. I think that's a good idea that we put that wording in there, so we can add that before the third reading.
Would that be on a schedule then? Would we put that into our rotational schedule? That it would be an annual thing, or would it be?
We could. The current ones that we'll take a look at in a few minutes haven't been updated for years, and so if there aren't any changes, with a board member sitting on the Community Ed Advisory Committee, we could say, do we want to just bring it back for review, or?
You know, they were updated about a year ago, so I don't know if that didn't make it onto the thing or whatnot, but we did go through it in Community Ed. Did Scott, and I see Scott sitting out there. Didn't the Community Ed Advisory Council go through the fee structures? Yeah.
And-
About a year ago.
Okay, and I'm not sure if that came back to the board, but
Okay.
yeah, definitely we would.
It
And
was-
I think that's a good
It's-
reason to put the wording in there.
Yeah, it's possible it didn't, because it's when Adam was here, we went through it with Adam, so maybe it got
Sure,
lost.
Yeah.
I don't know.
but we'll add that wording.
Other comments on this policy? If not, move on. Monica.
So, Cheryl, I want to ask you then, according to your comment, so is that going to be reviewed, or we need to discuss if we should be approving this, or what's the procedure here? Because your comment said that we should be reviewing, that it says here that it will be the advisory committee.
I'm saying that the revised, it's in the policy here that the Community Education Advisory Council would review the fee
procedure.
structure. And then I made the comment that if they do recommend changes, or, maybe they should review it annually or biannually. And if they make recommendations, or maybe if they don't, not changing a fee is a cost also.
Sure.
So maybe whatever, but then it should come to the board, because the Community Advisory Committee isn't a policy maker.
So what you're saying is that the language here should include that it will come back to the board? Okay.
Yes.
And-
So then they would make those changes, Monica, and bring them, at the third reading, you would see changes within the written policy here.
And I think I heard you say that they should come back annually. You'd like the word annually in there?
It says annually
Annual?
on the
Yes.
highlighted.
Perfect, yeah. Okay,
And we do community ed meetings
we'll
every
bring it back. Okay,
every other month now, is it?
I believe so.
So it'd just have to be scheduled in there at a specific time of the year, so.
I hate to belabor this, but A tells us that the school board may set reasonable regulations. Usually, there would be an administrative procedure that would allow the administration to set policies and procedures that don't need to come to the board. And I thought that's where B was headed, but now I'm left unclear as to whether you're saying that the administration has no procedure authority, it's all to the board, or, because that seems like a strange arrangement given how we operate everywhere else. Usually, I agree that fees should come back to the board on the consent agenda, I would think is where it would land, but I would think that the administration would have the ability to impose reasonable procedures for community education without coming to the board. And I don't see what's underneath B, so maybe there's something there.
And I might agree with that, and maybe it should maybe the fee thing should be a separate, like a C.
Should,
That annually, the Community Ed Committee would review the fee structure and recommend changes to the school board.
would it be helpful to take a look at the next two attachments have the plans and procedures and the fee schedule? Would be helpful to review that and then come back to it, or?
Well, I just think you ought to be thinking carefully about what it is that you want to be able to do in community education that's procedure-like, that you don't need to come to the board for.
Yes.
That's all. I don't know what that might be. I don't know enough about it, but it does seem like the two paragraphs together are a little bit unclear as to what you've reserved to the administration without going to the board.
We'll take it back and review it for clarity before third reading? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jerry. I wanted to, I don't think that we need to be approving all fees that come here, and even those procedures plans. So I understand that the Education Advisory Committee, the Community Education Advisory Committee is an advisory committee, but I will expect that some responsibility about about taking the recommendations from the advisory committee will fall into the administration, and that the administration has full power to do that. So wanted to ask you more and specifically why do you think that the board should be reviewing that? What is our bigger concern here?
I think generally when it comes to fees and money and budgets, the board is the one that makes the approval. Jerry, you were gonna.
No, I thought she was asking me, and I was going to say, because Al said that he, I don't know, I think they all should think about the flexibility they need to do their job, and when the third one comes back, have the flexibility they need, but on the other hand, when you're raising fees for things, it's not only that the board approves it, but the board takes the responsibility, and there's something to be said for the staff being able to say the board raised the fees, so.
Well, it's raise and, again, it's not just raise, it's raise and lower fees, and if you don't leave that in the hands of the board, I think you could create a scenario where that would cause problems, where that could cause problems. Willie?
What I'm understanding the board or this discussion is to make sure that it's consistent to other practices that we have throughout our organization. So we can take a look at that, because bottom line, whether it's from a advisory committee or whatever, the recommendation comes to the administration, and the administration makes the recommendation to the board. And so we're just making sure that, I think we need to make sure we're consistent with that.
Right. So go back to board book. Go to written plans. So at the first reading, the question came up about the written plans and procedures, and so these have been attached. Community ed staff have gone through these with some recommended changes that we would take to the Community Ed Advisory Board at their first meeting in the fall. Not a lot of changes here. I think in the Class C, we serve multi jurisdictions now, so instead of just city use, it's municipalities. Just some updated of terminology, some changes in practice for the swimming pools with infants, and then some updating of some security fees just due to wage increases over the years. Another change as far as weather, we use social media and the website more than radio, so that was updated. And those are the major ones there. Go back. Oh, go ahead.
If I could just a second, Monica, and I just want to, I'd made a comment to Willie. When we talk about community ed and fees, where KidStop is one of the things that charges fees, and it's a lot of money. And I don't know that it's right when you're dealing with the community ed budget to leave all of that in the hands of the community, to leave the accountability for that in the hands of the Community Ed Advisory Board. And that's why I think the advisory board could advise to the administration, who's then going to recommend to the board, and it gets pushed through a consent agenda. But in the end, we're accountable for the community ed budget. So it's not just rental of playground equipment for a weekend or something. It can amount to some very big dollars. So those are my thoughts.
Then the facilities fees and charges, you'll see quite a bit of recommended changes that again will first vet through the Community Ed Advisory Committee. Looking back, the current one, last update we could find was 2004. The hourly rates needed some adjusting. It looks like that first one we went down. What that would be is we may have multiple groups there the same evening, so we wouldn't charge them all the cost of that building attendant. And so it could be anywhere from 8 to 14, depending upon how many groups are there. But the majority of the changes here, as you look down, have to do with technology that's not available anymore. It's not used anymore. Things like phonographs and VCRs, we do different things now. So the recommendation is that we clean this up and use list what we actually use. We don't have summer and school year fees. It's one fee, so we update it to that. And those are the majority of the changes there. And again, these are procedural, not policy.
Shannon just pointed out something that I wasn't aware of. What's the Myers Schoolhouse?
Myers Schoolhouse is a one-room schoolhouse that the school district owns out in the St. Augusta area. Sometimes classes go out there, spend the day in the one-room schoolhouse environment. Good experience for students. Are there questions on any of the other 900 policies? We focused on 902 because that's where the majority of the questions were.
No further questions, so then the 900s, you'll come back with those changes at the next at the next board meeting at the work session.
Yes.
Next. Proposed new policy 417 and updated 503. It's a second reading. Carol Potter.
Good evening. 417, chemical use and abuse, is a new policy for us. And at our work session, we had one suggestion that was made, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Item 3 on page 4. At the very end, there we go. Thanks, Gary. At the very end, we did a strikeout on proposed for expulsion, and this was in there during the work session, and we had a question on that, and we decided to leave it out because our levels of discipline are outlined in our code of conduct. During the work session, there were not any other questions on this policy. Does anybody have any others for tonight?
Barry?
So I understand why you're not proposing them for expulsion as a matter of course, but are you implying that students involved in abuse, possession, transfer, distribution cannot be, I would think that you would comply with student discipline policy, but this seems to be saying that suspension is the only remedy.
Our code of conduct outlines the different levels of it, and so expulsion is a level in our code of conduct.
That's what I'm saying.
So,
and I agree. I have no problem with the taking out of the requirement you propose for expulsion, but now it seems to say that suspension is you've swapped suspension for expulsion. Are there not circumstances with this where you might
not be suspended?
Might be expelled?
In compliance with the student discipline.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
That's the situation where it could lead to an expulsion, but all students who abuse, possess, transfer, distribute, or sell will be suspended.
Right. And it's understood, is it, that something more than suspension might occur? Because it does seem a little ambiguous to me. Maybe just take a look at that.
certainly can do that. Any other questions?
Something like, will be
If I-
suspended and then
if I under-
receive appropriate
Right.
discipline.
And I think that if I understand it correctly, that's what it's indicating, is that we'll be suspended and then in compliance with the student discipline policy, so the administrator would go to the student discipline policy and from that would determine if there are additional consequences because it's the second offense of this, or, you know, whatever it may be.
And I just think there's a slightly clearer way to say
Maybe,
that.
yeah.
We can take a look at that. Thanks. Okay, any other questions on 417? Okay, we'll move to 503, student attendance. On page 2, item B, there was a question asked at the work session regarding the very last sentence. When approved by the school board, the attendance procedures will be, we changed it, it said included as an addendum, and we're removing addendums, and so we changed it to say will be defined in the student handbook. On page 3, then, item 1,
Speak up if you have questions, because I'm reading, so I'm not looking.
number 1, there was a question regarding illness. And this was very good because we looked it up in the student handbook. We did not have in there, it just stated illness previously, and we added parents will verify student illness to the school administration up to 15 days per school year. Absences in excess of 15 days may require a doctor verification to be excused. And that's exactly what our student handbook says. So we added that in.
Al, can I ask a question? Just for clarification, that's 15 days running total, 15 separate incidents, is that one a day apiece?
It can be intermittent days. It doesn't have to be 15 consecutive.
Okay.
Okay. Then on page 3, item 3, there was another question regarding the death or funeral in the student's immediate family. And we left it to say immediate family because number 16 at the very bottom of the page indicates that in any special circumstance, the administration can approve additional excused absences. And then on page 7, yes, item 9, thanks, Gary. It was a recommendation that we would take out this entire line, and we did that. Okay. And they're smiling. Why are you smiling? You're so happy we're finished? Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay, thank you.
No more questions. We will move on to resolution relating to the termination and non-renewal of teaching contracts of named probationary teachers. Tracy Flynn Bowe.
Good evening, board members. In our ongoing staffing process, we're bringing tonight another resolution regarding the non-renewal of probationary teachers. This should be the final resolution that we'll require for this staffing period, and so I'm looking for a motion to approve the resolution.
So I introduce the motion, resolution relating to the termination and non-renewal of the teaching contract of named probationary teachers.
Second.
Monica, second Jerry. Is there any discussion? If not, Mr. Moser, do you call roll?
Monica Segura Schwartz,
Yes.
Jerry Von Korf,
Yes.
Jeff Bullrice,
Yes.
Shannon Hawes,
Yes.
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Bruce Moles, yes.
Thank you, Tracy. Next, we move to the superintendent's report. Mr. Willie Jett.
Chair Dahlgren, members of the board, it is that time of day or that time of night, and it feels as if I need to make sure I say this. This is a time during a school year that it's a time of celebration, okay? We have top 10 awards coming, we have graduations coming, so I just need to make sure that this is an upbeat type of report. First and foremost, I'm going to start with a student. Apollo Senior Addie Hosheisel was recently nominated and chosen as a Rainbow of Hope Award recipient. She will be awarded $1,000, and her name will be put on the Rainbow of Hope plaque displayed at the Shriners Hospital in the Twin Cities. The Rainbow of Hope Award has been around since 1998. 3 recipients are awarded annually, and the recipients are recognized for their contribution they've made to their community. They've had a positive attitude in overcoming their physical limitations, and is an outstanding role model to their peers. Next, I'm going to talk about a staff member. Christina Towinski, a second-grade teacher at Oak Hill Community School, has been named a regional honoree in the WEM Foundation's 2017 Outstanding Educator Awards program. WEM is a charitable foundation of Whitney McMillan, a member of the Cargill family. This teacher is being honored in the Teacher Achievement category, which recognizes exemplary teachers who support, inspire, and assist students to attain greater learning as evidenced by student achievement. Flip-flopping back to a student, recently Apollo athletes Peter Nelson and Callie Lynch, along with Tech athletes Kathy Schroeder and Chris Backus, were honored at the 70th Annual St. Cloud Exchange Club Honor Athlete Luncheon for being the top athletes of their schools. The National Exchange Club is an all-volunteer national service organization of men and women who serve their community, develop leadership skills, and enjoy new friendships. Students from Mark Weimer's CTE classes and Andrea Burris's art class at Apollo collaborated on a work of art using recycled gymnasium floor from Apollo. If you look right outside the superintendent's office to the right, the artwork consists of a plaque showcasing Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Alongside is corresponding piece of King pointing to the saying, "Let freedom ring." The artwork was hung outside or on the wall and unveiled to students and staff. The piece is a symbol of and a reminder of inclusion, hope, and our future. The new adaptive playground at Talahi Community School officially opened, and it was dedicated this week. I believe some of you were there. This playground is fully accessible to all students, including those in wheelchairs. The playground was funded in partnership with the district by the Lions Club, Bremer Bank, Kaboom, Centricare, BNSF Railway, and many other community partners. A special shout out to Talahi foster grandparent, John Bowden, who spearheaded the fundraising and volunteer efforts. And lastly, I need to say something. I am fortunate because I sit at this table tonight. I sit with a talented executive group. And so I just need to say that. And so with that, I would like to recognize Ms. Joni Olson, who recently was selected as the new superintendent of Grand Rapids School District. So I need to say congratulations, Joni. And as I started out earlier saying, it's a time of celebration, that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Jett. Next, we have standing committee reports. First up, Board Development, Policy and Governance. Shannon Hawes.
We met this past Tuesday on the 23rd for a somewhat extended meeting. The majority of it was spent discussing revised Policy 507, student discipline. It will be brought to the June work session, and today Carol Potter emailed out the proposed student discipline policy. So that'll be in your email for review if you would like to take a look at that before we meet at our work session.
Thank you, Shannon. Next, we have community linkages. Mr. Mose.
May 11th was the meeting of the most recent meeting of the Linkages Committee, Community Linkage and Engagement. Our presentations at the May 11th meeting were a presentation by Stephanie Peterson of an organization or an initiative acronymed SOUP, S-O-U-P, and she described this as a community enterprise in which selected groups or individuals from the community make presentations to whomever comes to that invited event, and everybody puts some money in, gets a ticket for making a voluntary donation, and all those with tickets get to vote upon that proposal which they favor the most, and generally speaking, these are raising anywhere from $400 up to the most recent one, I think, was $600. And so that presentation was made. Second presentation, linkage presentation, was made by member Jerry Von Korf from Equity, Integration, Education Committee, and he reported upon the proficiency and growth discussions that are being held in the district, and Mr. Von Korf made that presentation to the committee. I have noted here 3 engagement outreaches. I try to best know, if it's reported to me, who's doing what. On Friday night, April 28th, I was invited to participate in the Tech Culture Night. They asked me to do a narrative as a native son of St. Cloud, and the theme was diversity and culture, and so I reported upon that from my experience and entertained them with a song. Wednesday, May 17th, members Fulrice and Mose, as reported earlier by Jeff, attended the Parents in Action graduation ceremony at South Junior High School. This is quite an achievement for people in our community, parents, for the very most part, who have children in our schools, and they go through a 6-week course with some rigor attached to it. And they must complete a certain number of assignments and attend all of these sessions. And upon doing that, they have a graduation ceremony. It's not lost upon anybody that goes there that for some of the parents there, never in their lives have they ever worn a cap and gown or ever received something in a ceremony approximating a graduation ceremony. And when they come with their children, those children are just so excited about seeing their parent be recognized in that way. It's a very, very good program that we have coming out of our equity department. Last evening, at the Tech Senior Awards program, members Henches and Mose were invited to participate, make presentations. As former graduates of Tech High School, we're always amazed by the collected talent on that stage last evening and the stories that are told about those students and their accomplishments, as well as the stories behind the presenters of those. We can certainly know and anticipate that the same level of success and achievement takes place at Apollo High School at their awards night also. Future community linkage presentations, we have 3 things that I'm considering here, and these have been on our radar here throughout the winter, and we will try to accomplish these perhaps in the order that I've listed them. I'm going to invite Coco Wu to come and talk to the linkage committee about the SCSU Confucius Institute Winter Camp with the Madison Chinese immersion students. We also have Karen Bankston and Melissa Hansick-Brill from our community and district that are going to report upon the St. Cloud State University American Association of University Women's STEM project and the Technology Savvy Day that took place this winter. And then thirdly, there is an initiative called the Math Smart Project, teaching mathematics through the arts, that is being organized and facilitated by Jane Oxton and Melissa Hansick-Brill. We will ask them to present to us also. That'll take us, we hope, through our summer schedule of meetings. And so the 4th item on here is just inviting members of the Board of Education, please send to me, please, mail to Bruce Mose, please, any ideas you have regarding summer community engagements that we might consider or reach out to, and any events you know of that might present community engagement opportunities. I'd appreciate if you would send your ideas or your thoughts to me, and I can then facilitate their addition to our agendas. Summertime by George, absolutely. Juneteenth Day comes to my mind. There are many items like that, and so we need to have that kind of collective feedback from the members of the board. Thank you very much. Well, I must say one other thing in terms of community engagement. This fits into our committee as well as any other person in the committee. Let's just turn our eyes for a moment and look over there at Mr. Ganji, who has completed one more orbit of the sun as of today. How many orbits is that, Mr. Ganji? 57. Well,
Just a kid.
and you're just about 16 behind me. I had completed 16 orbits before you started your first one, so just a kid, you bet. Mr. Ganji, happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Next up is Finance and Audit, Jeff Polrice.
Finance and Audit met on May 18th at about 7:30 in the morning. Present at the meeting was Board Member Jerry Von Korf, Board Member Bruce Henches, Committee Member James Newman, Amy Skullerud, Superintendent Willie Jett, Gary Ganji. There were some community members present, Scott Andreasen, Amy Bonfig, Dwight Funenstein, Janet Rigstead, and several other community members. We did talk about several topics. First one was the possible sale of Wilson, the old Wilson building. A recommendation was made by myself and voted on by the rest of the committee to ask the superintendent to begin the research and process of selling the site and then bringing that back to the board for full board discussion at a later date and possible action. There was a question about inviting conversations about the possible use of whoever bought the Wilson site, if that does happen, about having art space there. This community member that brought up that question was given board member Shannon Hawes' contact information because Shannon is very familiar with that area. Next up on our agenda, we were presented some profiles from MDE. We discussed information given to us from MDE about the same size districts, how we're doing and compared to finances, different topics, and how we compare to them. Board, item number 3 was the budget. We reviewed a handout on preliminary budget items. We will continue to gather information on this and report back the next board meeting when there's more finalized numbers and things shake out in June, I believe.
I believe, just to interrupt for a second,
Yeah,
I
please
believe
do.
the budget is a subject on our next work session, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so we'll get a lot of detail on it there.
Next, I had on the agenda the procedures and sale of obsolete equipment, policy number 900, so I tabled that. As seen in the second reading, there's changes being made. We'll wait till everything shakes out, and I may or may not bring it back to another discussion. It depends on the changes made. Item number 4 was we got some preliminary numbers back for the possible cost of renovating Tech High School's 2 buildings. A preliminary estimate came back from R.A. Morton. It was roughly in the $10 to $11 million area. Don't quote me on that. But it was unknown if this included the boiler, different work on the 3rd and floor, so that sounds like that might still be a work in progress to get some more firmer numbers. We'll be bringing this back next month if we have that further information and discuss it further details once they're given to us. We started to have a brief discussion on the Minnesota School of Business property, and that happened at about 9:15, and at 9:15, we also had a fire alarm. So we were done discussing everything anyway, so the committee meeting ended at 9:15.
Thank you, Jeff. Next, any questions on finance audit? Next up would be the Legislative Committee. Bruce Henches.
Mr. Chair, the Legislative Committee didn't actually meet in May. We were supposed to meet last Friday, but we thought we'd wait until this week and give the legislature a chance to finish, which it was scheduled to do on Monday. And of course, as we all know, the legislature is in special session. I don't know if they've finished that session today yet or not, but it appears they've reached an agreement with the governor on an education bill. But there were a couple of amendments made in the Senate, and so the entire thing has to be repassed by the House, hopefully today yet. Either way, Monica and I are attending the monthly AMSD meeting tomorrow morning in St. Paul. Dr. Tom Melcher, the Finance Director for the Minnesota Department of Education, will be presenting on the legislative happenings and the financial impact of the E12 bill. So I will know more after that meeting, and I will share what I know for sure after hearing from him. I did send out through email the draft E12 agreement budget highlights, which we had received from Scott Kuhnquist with AMSD. It was a 27-page document. I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to read it completely yet, but just to highlight some of the points of it, it looks like an overall $483 million increase in education spending in the next biennium. That will lead to a 2% increase on the formula. Voluntary pre-kindergarten funding will be frozen at its current level, and a new School Readiness Plus program is beginning with a $53 million start. There is a pupil transportation adjustment, which may mean additional funding for District 742. The original House bill called for about $330,000 additional dollars for 742. And then there were a number of policy changes. One being school boards will be allowed to plan up to 5 e-learning days in case of inclement weather. And I'm just going to mention these and certainly not try to explain them at this time. Then two, there are specific requirements for students not reading at grade level by grade 3 that districts must do. I'm sure we do most of them already, but it's very prescriptive. 3, unrequested leave of absence plans must be negotiated and developed with local bargaining units, and they are not last in, first out, or LIFO. Teacher licensing is major changes. There will be 3 tiers allowing for community experts. It is especially helpful to rural districts who don't have access to qualified teachers in certain areas. And then early learning scholarships. The Pathway 2 scholarships are frozen, and Pathway 1 scholarships are expanded significantly. So I did pass out to all the board members and actually administration also kind of a report card from the Legislative Committee regarding this legislative session. I'm not sure if it's a report card on the legislature or on how well we were able to influence legislation as a committee, but we'll say it's on the legislature anyway. And so I just want to quickly go through looking at our legislative platform from this year. And we had 5 goals in that platform. 1, to eliminate or at least begin to work on the special education cross-subsidy. The grade on that is an F. It was a total failure. Even though the governor came with a $45 million special education increased spending proposal, the House and the Senate brought nothing to the table, and ultimately there was nothing agreed to in the final agreement. That means our cross-subsidy in this district will continue to grow. It's $11 million this year. Even though Representatives Knobloch and Tice, along with Representative Jennifer Loon, the chair of the House Education Finance Committee, wrote a bill that would have even more aggressively supported special education through the 2021 biennium, the bill was never introduced because of the House target for education didn't allow enough funds for them to even introduce it. Now, the good news is that Representative Knobloch has indicated a continued willingness to work with us on this issue in the next session in an ongoing manner. Our second goal was adequate and stable funding of the basic formula of at least 2.5%. We gave ourselves a grade of B+ on that, or gave the legislature. The final bill calls for a 2% basic formula increase. That compares with the House proposal of 1.25% and the Senate proposal of 1.5%. So it turned out better than it appeared it would be before negotiations. And again, truthfully, outstate school districts worked hard to have the majority of the funding put in the basic formula. Number 3, goal was to continue to increase access to high-quality school-based pre-kindergarten programs. I'm sorry, that should be pre-kindergarten programs. The grade on that, we said, was a B-. Voluntary pre-kindergarten funding was frozen at the current level for the next 2 years. But again, the House proposal had been to eliminate it totally. Pathway 2 scholarships, which are awarded to students who attend school-based preschool programs, were also frozen at the 2017 level, but again, the House had proposed eliminating them totally. And then the a new School Readiness Plus program was begun and funded with $53 million. These funds can be expended at child care centers, family child care programs, or community-based organizations that meet the minimum requirements of the program. And the old law called for such programs to be 3 or 4 star rated by July 1st of 2016 in order to qualify for a Pathway Scholarship. That requirement has now been delayed until 2020. So there is no requirement for programs to receive Pathway 1 scholarships to be 3 or 4 star rated. And again, this was clearly done to help rural communities who lack school programs and quality child care facilities. 4, we called for an investment in EL funding to eliminate the EL cross-subsidy. Again, that would be a grade of F. Neither the governor, the House, or the Senate proposed any funding for this initiative. And then lastly, number 5 was evaluate the use of assessments in high-stakes testing. And we give a grade of D to that. The legislative auditor did issue a report criticizing the system of MCA testing for the amount of time taken from teaching and learning to assess these, or to run these assessments, the lack of return on investment, the wasted time of licensed counselors, media directors, and others in running the testing labs, and the amount of funding that goes to testing companies. However, in the end, the new federal ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, requires standardized testing, and the legislature passed a series of rules regarding student participation, school performance, and disaggregating data on these standardized tests. And so our overall rating is a D, because in a year with a $1.65 billion budget surplus, no steps were taken by the legislature to address the most pressing need regarding the special education cross-subsidy, especially for our district. So hopefully the legislature will finish today, and tomorrow we'll hear from Dr. Melcher regarding the impact. Thank you.
Yes, Bruce.
Mr. Henches, I think that I might like to say that I think that this is a summative evaluation you gave yourself right here of this grade, but I think that all of us would say in a formative manner, formative evaluation, thank you very much for the hard work that you and your committee do. And so your formative evaluation in this person's estimation is a solid B.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mose, biology teacher. It's certainly something we'll need to continue to work on to improve.
I have a couple quick questions. You indicated that the Representative Knobloch and Loon could not advance their special ed bill because of the targets. Who sets the House targets?
House leadership, of course, does.
But would that not be Representative Knobloch's committee that sets the targets?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, the answer to that would be, to some extent, yes. I'm not sure what role the Speaker and the Majority Leader play, and in terms of setting those targets, but clearly Representative Knobloch plays a role in that.
And I don't mean to detract from Representative Knobloch's efforts on behalf of special education, but there is kind of a cyclical shifting of responsibility across the legislature on special education. We can't do special education because we can't do special education. My second question is, you mentioned that outstate districts pushed for money on the formula. Would that be the MSBA? Was the MSBA pushing for?
Yes.
And are we a member of the MSBA?
Well, we of course are a member of the MSBA, also a member of the AMSD, which took a little different perspective, although even for AMSD 3, at least 2.5 on the formula was an important part of it. So,
but I think that one thing that we ought to be thinking about, and maybe these feasts and famine, is the next time around that we need to have a dialogue with the MSBA on working together to give a boost to all of the needs of the school districts.
It's really kind of interesting because, frankly, the division in our state may be as much between rural and urban as between Democrat and Republican in terms of what people's needs are and where they feel funding should flow. Clearly, urban districts with large numbers of kids with a variety of special needs prefer to see the funding categorized in other ways to help those students reach proficiency, but other smaller districts don't have a lot of those.
But there are examples of rural districts that have had 2 or 3 new special ed kids with high bills who've maxed out on their special ed
Yes.
cap, and so it feels like it's more if, you know, you're on the island kind of thing. If you have special ed problems, we're somehow rationalizing, and again, you've been a passionate advocate for this, but I think this was a bad year for special education, and we ought to work together as a board to expect more from the legislature in the next cycle.
I do know that Representative Knobloch is very interested in particularly policy changes that could occur regarding special education mandates. But I also know that it's a hornet's nest to try to wade into suggesting that certain mandates should be eliminated. So that's part of the dilemma we face in that too. But until mandates are reduced, clearly the state and the federal government ought to pay for what they require districts to provide. So.
Thank you, Mr. Henches. Next is the Personnel and Negotiations Committee, Monica Segura Schwartz.
Thank you, Chair. We didn't have any meetings since last time that we had the report here, so no report at this time.
Thank you. And next is the Integration, Equity, and Education Committee, Jerry Van Korf.
Our committee, myself, Mr. Henches, and Monica Segura Schwartz, our meeting has been postponed. We're meeting, I think, next week. Is that right? And we had asked for a presentation on the climate survey, but we got an extra added bonus. It came here tonight. And at our next meeting, Dr. Huff is going to be presenting on her vision of some test score ways of reporting. I'll also report that my son recommended that I read a book, and I'm kind of going to recommend one book, one school board, or just to say we recommend it to me, and I recommend it to Mr. Henches, and you've ordered a copy of yours.
It's ordered.
And we're racing through to see who's going to finish first, but the name of the book is Measuring Up: What Educational Testing Really Tells Us by Harvard professor Daniel Koretz. And the book is derives from his course for Harvard education students that's non-statistical, but what I really like about this book is that he's an advocate for standardized testing, and he's an advocate against the misuse of standardized testing, and so I just think it's a very, very rich book, and I hope you got your money's worth, because I'm really learning a lot.
Jerry, you will email that to us?
Be glad to.
Thank you.
Glad to.
We'll allow an all 7-person email if you just send the name of the book. Bruce Mose.
So I just want to say, Mr. Henches, if I heard correctly, if Mr. Van Korf is in a reading race with you, you're going to lose.
Well, not only that, I don't have the book yet. Amazon.com is sending it, so he's got a big head start.
Doesn't matter.
I got a Kindle. Mine came instantaneously.
Doesn't matter.
I give up already.
All right, is there anything else for the good of the cause? If not, it's 9:54 PM. Meeting's adjourned.